everyone, and welcome. We're live from Book Expo America 2014 in New York City, and our guest right now is author Anne Aguirre, who's written a new series of new adult novels for Harlequin HQN, and the books are called As Long as You Love Me, I Want It That Way, and The Shape of My Heart. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you so much for having me.
And you're a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author. You're multi-published across a variety of genres, from urban fantasy, romantic, science fiction, paranormal romance, and dystopian fiction. What drew you to new adults?
The coolest thing about this particular genre is that I get to combine the fresh, young voice that I use in writing new adult fiction, but I also get to write the heat that I would put in a romance novel. Because everyone is of age, the protagonists are 18 to 21 years old, so I can write the sex scenes however I want, which I really don't do in young adult for obvious reasons. New adult is really fun. It's enjoyable to write, I think, because the stories for late teens and early 20-somethings have an intensity that you don't find in older protagonists. Whether we want it to or not, life sort of wears us down a little, and we don't have that same white-hot, white-knuckled desperation that we have when we're very young.
It's also new.
Yes, everything is like the first time. You're willing to experiment. You're willing to show poor judgment. In fact, sometimes you don't even know that it is poor judgment until many years later when you look back and think, wow, how did I survive being 22? Seriously, like the things I did. And it's really fun to write about that because it's that sort of no-holds-barred passion that I get to infuse in the stories.
Is there any genre that you haven't tried yet that you'd really love to write?
No. I feel bad. That's a very concise answer, but the only genre that I have not written is Westerns at this point, and I have no desire to write a Western, so no.
So other than the Backstreet Boys, what's the common thread that ties these three books together?
Well, actually, the Backstreet Boys is sort of just an Easter egg from the 90s. The series is not actually about Backstreet Boys, and in fact, there's only one mention of the Backstreet Boys, and that's in the final book, Book 3. The reason that I ended up with these titles, if I can get a little anecdotal with you, is that I was on tour for my young adult novels with Jessica Brody, Jennifer Albin, and Leigh Bardugo. And Leigh would always tell this really interesting anecdote about how people get together. And, you know, when you find out a couple's been together for 20-odd years, you always ask, how did you meet, right? And you're impressed. But what you're really wondering when you ask, how did you meet, is how did you stay together? So I listened to Leigh tell this story on tour multiple times at different stops, and I thought, okay, I want to tell that meeting story of a couple meeting young in college and then managing to stay together. And the Backstreet Boys, it's basically like a little nod at my tour buddies, because we would always listen to the Backstreet Boys in the van on the way to the events to pump up. So we would be singing like Backstreet's Back or I Want It That Way in the van, and we would come into the event all pumped up. And so it was just odd the way it worked out that all of the titles, it's more like I worked the title in, and so it's just a nod at Backstreet and a nod at my tour buddies, but it doesn't actually relate directly to the book. It's not about Backstreet fandom, but what the books are actually about is three separate couples, people falling in love during college. They are romances, and they're connected basically through the apartment, because in the first book, the heroine moves into a new building and the hero lives downstairs. In the second book, the heroine moves out of the apartment and goes back home, and she's always had a thing for her best friend's older brother, so that's how that's connected. And then in the third book, the hero and heroine are roommates in that same apartment.
These books are very much a work of your heart, from what I can tell.
Oh, yeah, I loved writing them. They were so much fun, and it was a real pleasure to work with Harlequin on the project.
Tell us a little bit about what's coming up next after this series. What can readers look forward to?
The next thing that I'm writing is the second book in my YA series. The tentative title is Public Enemies, and my YA is sort of paranormal and horror combined, but it always has a romantic thread because I'm incapable of writing stories without any romance in them at all.
Well, Anne, thank you for sitting down with us today, and I wish you all the best with the series.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.